Welcome to the Snap Audition Podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and leave a 5-star review. We're here with Nikki Abissi, trombonist of New York and New Jersey, right? You live in New Jersey now, right?
Yep, I do.
Yeah, awesome. And playing with the American Symphony Orchestra, among other things, including teaching and inventor of the what do you call it? The trombone extension thing.
Extendabone.
Extendabone. Yeah, I just found out about this, and you have it right there.
Yes.
I had played trombone. I don't think I was ever at an age where I needed an extension, but I could see that being a big issue. So I always like to ask people about their background, like how did you get into the arts to music, and then how did you decide, like, hey, this is where what I want to do with my adult life?
Mm-hmm. So I grew up around New York until I was about 12, and my parents always took us to Broadway shows and Radio City, and I was listening to music, and I loved the male singers. That was like my thing, you know. Jim Croce, Billy Joel, all of the male leads in the musicals, much more than the female voice. And when it came time to pick an instrument in elementary school, my mom said no drums, anything but the drums. And I was like, not that interested in the drums anyway, so that was fine. Yeah. And I picked the trombone for two reasons. One, it was the most unique. There was no buttons. 10-year-old brain and wanting to be like fun, artsy person. I loved that. Yeah. And also it sounded like the male voice. It sounded like a tenor.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Forever, that's always been my influence of my sound concept. I have my favorite trombone player sounds, right? But it's also like, I want to play the trombone like Jim Croce sings and James Taylor sings and Bing Crosby.
I have never heard of anybody being influenced by a specific vocal range at that, especially at that age. You were very attuned to music at that age, weren't you?
We were just always listening to music, and that tessitura just appealed to me so much more than the female voice. So I just really gravitated toward that, and I was pretty good. Like, I wasn't amazing, but I was pretty good, and my parents sort of encouraged me. After my first year of the rental trombone, they got me a little trombone with a valve on it. And then eventually I went to Interlochen Arts Camp. Summers, because when I was 12, we moved to Illinois, so I learned about Interlochen and all things happening in the Midwest. And I had a private teacher at that point, and I found out, I can do this for a living. I just kept pursuing it after that.
So how was that? Like, just real quick, how was the experience, going to a boarding school? I mean, in a sense.
I mean, Interlochen completely changed my life. And I love telling this story about the camp. So it's like a who's who also of musicians and actors and dancers and stuff. So Carol Jansch, who is principal tuba of the Philadelphia Orchestra, we were both in intermediate girls together my first summer. So we were in the band together. And we were in we called it forced practice, but it was like supervised practice time for kids in middle school. They made sure that we were practicing a certain number of hours a day. And at the time, she was better than most of the high school tuba players. Like, she was challenging to be in the high school band. Wow. It was amazing. Yeah. And at my placement audition, they put the sight reading in front of me, and there was something in tenor clef, and I was like, what's this? And they were like, you're in the band, you don't need to do that. And I will say, I signed up for the band. I checked that box because I was like, orchestra's for the strings, band is for everybody else. I didn't know that I could play in an orchestra. Like, I was knew nothing. And it was similar when I went to the academy, that I just knew nothing. One of our first studio classes, Tom Riccobono is our teacher. He goes, okay, we're going to do a mock audition, and we're going to play tenor trombones, tuba mirum, bolero, Hungarian march, and the ride. And that was all he said. And I wrote that down. And this was before Google. Right. And it was dial-up internet. So I went down to the orchestra library where they had DOS computers. Right. So terrible search engine. Yeah. And I did not have enough information to search for what I needed. So I had to talk to the scary old man librarian who reminded me of Ollivander, for anybody who's seen Harry Potter. That's what this guy was like. And I said, okay, I'm brand new. My teacher just told us in studio class that I have to play these pieces, but I don't know the entire title and I don't know the composer. and I was too afraid to ask. So he made parts for me, and he got me like 3 recordings of each piece. And I ended up having the best bolero in the placement auditions because I didn't know it was supposed to be hard.
If there was people listening that were thinking about going there or having their kids go there, like what would you say?
I have lifelong friends from Interlochen. And I think as long as it doesn't create an insurmountable financial burden, that you should go. No question. I don't think a person needs 4 years. Yeah. I think 2 years was just right. I got to experience marching band and, public school. And I also wish that I had played sports one more year before I left. I wish I'd continued on in softball one more year because, as we become so hyper-focused, we just let everything else go by the wayside. Yes. And I wish that I had kept up with some of the other things that I liked, like chorus and softball and things. Just another year, just one more year. Before I was so serious about the trombone, I was afraid of the ball.
Wow. So do you remember back, I always like to ask people about their auditions, obviously the Snap audition, but do you remember back to your audition at Julliard? I know they can have tough auditions there.
Yeah, and I didn't have to do one of the tapes, which I guess they do now.
The screens, pre-screening?
The pre-screening. There was no pre-screening. Although I had already played in a masterclass for Joe Alessi at that point, and I'd taken a lesson with him. And I will say, for college auditions and graduate school, it's a very good idea to take a lesson with your top choices of teachers, because not only do you get a sense of, do you have a good rapport with this person? Does this person teach how you learn? Also, it gave me an opportunity to show growth. Not only did we have a really good experience together in that masterclass that I learned a lot just in 20 minutes and there. Yeah. But then I went and took a lesson with him a year or so later over winter break. And then I played my live audition. Yeah. And so I would encourage anybody that you want to try out the teachers and get a sense of things. But also it gave me an opportunity to show my growth from that winter lesson to the live audition. So anyway, without having this pre-screening, I went in and I had my pieces that I was going to play. And it was Joe Alessi, Per Brevig, and Mike Powell. But what I remember the most was when I started I played the first movement of the Gordon Jacob Concerto, which opens with the 3-octave B flats.
Yeah, it's tough.
And by the time I hit my high B flats, Mike Powell just smiled and crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair, like he just was going to enjoy himself. And I decided I'm going to play for him the whole time.
Because he was giving that positive vibes.
He was just so kind, and he had this air that was like, I'm going to focus on this person and I'm going to play for them and enjoy myself and make music. It was really great. But as good as it possibly could have been. And I remember at one point Joe being like, okay, play an F major scale, 2 octaves. And he was very doing this thing, and I was like, okay, I don't understand why you're being aggressive about it, but okay. My little scales, I did all the things they asked me to do.
Well, maybe he took on a persona that he thought he needed to have during the audition. That was this is serious, right?
He was testing. He had some question about my technique that he needed to answer.
And Julliard, my son and I just toured there, and he has a friend. He's in the jazz department, but it is intense. Amount of. And how was your time there? I'm sure you grew and you learned. Mm-hmm. What was the most challenging part of it?
Learning how to handle criticism and self-criticism in a healthy way. And that still took a few more years. Yeah. Also, I went through a period where I was slow progress. I had a high set. I had a separate embouchure to play high. And I had to learn how to not do that and just have one embouchure and be efficient and get through. And that was a really slow grind to fix. And I shot up like crazy in my junior year, but it was a struggle for the first couple years. First 2 years was very rough. I could do some things really well, but I just couldn't play above a high C. So Bolero sucked and everything. There were certain excerpts in our placement auditions that I was like, I'm going to go in and fall on my face because I can't play this note anymore.
And you had to you prepare yourself knowing you're not going to be able to pull it off.
knowing I couldn't do it. And I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I always worked really hard, and that wasn't a question. But there's just certain things that take a very long time of slow, almost you can't notice it, sort of incremental, slow progress. And then you get a J curve where it just goes like gangbusters once it clicks. I think it's made me a better teacher because I have that compassion.
Yeah.
I have that understanding and compassion, and I'm able to teach patience, which was not my strong suit. And I'm like, I know it sucks. You're not going to like this advice, but you just got to be like, trust the process.
Yeah.
Nobody likes this. Nobody wants to hear it. I certainly didn't want to hear it, but at least I say this not from being really patient, but struggling with patience, with impatience, being extremely impatient. That was something that I had to learn.
So those like me. That's the way things. I was so impatient. I dropped out of music school. I think when people don't understand about playing an instrument at that level, it's a very technical. It's like learning to do surgery. There's no one's life is on the line, but you have to. It's a very refinement. And like what I learned about myself was like I love the big picture of things, and I think if I would have gone back and played again, I would probably take more of a diverse interest in music instead of just trying to be an amazing trombone player. You have to be a very detailed person that wants to refine very small aspects of your playing. I
keep trying to teach people that you have to learn to love the process. And if you don't love refining your craft, getting better at basic technique, if you don't enjoy that and enjoy the little baby steps that you can take by working on your arbans, then this is going to be really hard and not very pleasant.
You got through Julliard, did a great job. And then, what is it like at that last year of a conservatory knowing, okay, what's next?
And at Julliard in particular, it's very challenging. Like mental health stuff. I've got like a whole, this bookshelf is all about that. What was hard is that so many outliers go to Julliard and they win a job before they finish their undergrad, before they finish their master's.
Okay, wow.
And so if you don't have a job in an orchestra before you graduate, you're like, am I one of the failures?
And by job, you mean in an orchestra?
In an orchestra.
Typically.
Or a military band, like one of the premier bands.
Premier bands or something,
Yeah, although not that many people at Julliard take those auditions. So that's like completely unhelpful and unhealthy and not based in reality. It's all wrong in every way, shape, or form. But that's thought process is there. Thankfully, it was my undergrad, so I was auditioning for grad school, right? I still had a couple more years. I ended up getting a fellowship in the New World Symphony instead. And the best way of describing it is it's like the minor leagues of the sport, like minor league baseball, right?
Yeah.
You're paid a very little amount, but we're also given free housing to sort of offset that.
Okay. Yeah.
And you do the job of being in an orchestra where you play concerts, you rehearse every day. And there's certain weeks where it's chamber music to lighten it up. And they also put a lot of emphasis on education, things like learning how to do public speaking and community engagement training. Lately, they've been doing a lot more with entrepreneurship. Since I've left, they've developed whole other programs. They're always thinking about how they can best train us to go out and be successful. When I was there and before, it was like either you're in an orchestra or you're not successful. Now, I think they're realizing that there's more to being a successful musician than just orchestra job, military band, nothing. It's not binary.
Hopefully there is.
But this is this unhelpful conversation that people have and this like unhelpful way of looking at things. And it's the problem of being in a conservatory, the problem of being in a New World Symphony of old. Now they're not doing that. Now they're like, if you create your own education, community engagement program in a community, you are a successful musician. You are changing the world through music, even if you're not playing your instrument to do so.
These conservatories, New England, whatever, and then the orchestra system is a system. I just talked to cellist from the LA Philharmonic, she's been there since 85. But the system, and I'm learning about this because I came from the jazz world where we have no systems and it's chaos. It's like a polar opposite, like the freelance world and then the orchestral military band world. And I know that a lot of military band people, because in Colorado Springs where I live, we have several military bands. But I was just surprised by how, with the contrast of like how structured they are versus what I'm used to in music is like extremely unstructured. Like, hey, can you play on this gig tonight? It pays this, you know. So you got into the New World Symphony, you had the audition, and then how long did you spend there?
I was there for 2 years, and then I won a job in the Alabama Symphony playing second trombone.
Cool.
I was there for 3 years.
Yeah.
And while I was there, I was qualified runner-up for principal of the Colorado Symphony in Denver.
Yeah.
And the person who won the job took 13 months to turn it down. And after 9 months, they couldn't give me the job anymore, even though I was qualified runner-up. It was just in their contract, but they gave me 1 year.
Okay.
So I went to Colorado to play principal trombone for a year. But while I was there, my now husband proposed. We had been dating. He was principal trombone of the Atlanta Symphony.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was in, and it's like 2 hours away. He had a really horrible injury in his lip.
Yeah.
Couldn't play. So I started subbing in the orchestra.
Yeah.
And we became really good friends. And a couple years later, when we were both single at the same time, we just started dating.
Oh, okay. And
But
so
that injury, and I had a health scare with something called Meniere's disease.
Okay.
That
never heard of that.
It's usually causes vertigo, but it's an imbalance in the fluid behind your eardrum.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay.
An inability to regulate the fluid. And so when I was having these, we still don't know what the heck it was, but it happened for a couple years and it was very upsetting because I would get fluid caught behind my eardrum, and it would, if I put drones in my ears, the bad ear, the pitch was wrong. And when the fluid was back there, I could feel sound waves hitting my eardrum.
Wow.
So I couldn't go to the movies. I couldn't be in loud restaurants. I was on a cardiac diet of low sodium food. I was eating like a sick person like 25 years old. I hated it. It was awful.
And you couldn't play during this time?
I did play. I took some time off while they were making sure that I didn't have a hole in my eardrum or something.
Yeah.
Couple weeks, but then I was playing with like messed up ear, and then trying to manage taking steroids and diuretics and like eating. It sucked. So that experience gave me more empathy into what Colin was going through, because Meniere's, if you have it, you're going to be deaf.
Wow.
So I was like, well, am I going to be, if I have this, I'm going to be deaf in this year, and there's a 50% chance I'll be deaf in this year. So my music career has an end date. Do I love this enough to do it anyway? And that was what he was going through. It was like, does he love this enough to keep doing it? And that like helped us connect. So we got married. I moved to Atlanta. 9 months later, he had won associate principal in the New York Philharmonic. So now we moved to New York.
So you had the job here in Colorado, and then you had to give it up.
Here's the thing that I have to tell everybody is like, we think that that's it. You just like, my goal was to win a job in an XM orchestra.
Right.
And I did it twice. It wasn't enough. It's just a job. I wanted a partner. And when I met my partner, then I decided I wanted a family. Yeah. And I cannot take a day off the trombone, like more than a day. Like I have to play. I have to play or I'm not myself. It's a part of who I am. And I will never stop working. And I would prefer the stability of one orchestra job rather than freelancing. Freelancing is competitive and it's challenging and it's hard to keep track of the schedule, and it's wacky, but it's also wonderful that I get to play so many different types of music in different ensembles. And
did you lose hearing in that 1 year?
A tiny bit, not really.
So what's the prognosis then for the future? It's up in the air?
Yeah, it's a diagnosis of omission, and they never completely figured it out. And it hasn't really bothered me, except for when there's applause, I hear static. Otherwise, I'm fine. It was just this weird couple years that was scary for no real good reason other than that it helped me understand Colin better.
Yeah, it's amazing how the little experiences of our lives, or big ones, add up to who we are and how we treat other people. And I've been learning about these audition experiences with these orchestras and how intense it can be. And I didn't realize like they invite you based on you send in a resume or something, and then they invite you. Like, what's the last audition you've done?
Princeton Symphony principal trombone.
What was that experience like compared to the New World Symphony? Like, how have you changed
Oh, I've
since?
changed a lot. I mean, the actual
Yeah.
audition experience was night and day. Me and one other person have trials for the job now.
So what does that
And
mean? What is trial? What is the?
it means that we're going to split the season next year doing the job. So that's the
Okay.
trial, is you do the job. And then they decide based on those weeks of your trial if they're going to
Hmm.
give you the contract to the other person or nobody.
Really? Oh, so you're split. Oh, you're competing head to head,
Yep.
trombone versus trombone.
But this is
Yeah.
the best, to me, this is the best kind of competing because it's doing the actual job versus the audition, which is a very specific skill set that is closer to a standardized test than doing the job. People who are good at standardized tests
Yeah.
have a high likelihood of doing well at the highest level of schooling. You're good at
Definitely.
a standardized test, there it is very likely you will also do well at an Ivy League school. But there are also people who are terrible at taking standardized tests that are exceptional students and really good at note taking and essays and doing the work and would excel at an Ivy League school, even though they have anxiety and they are terrible test takers. So auditions are the standardized test. It is a very specific niche skill that you learn how to take and you jump through that hoop
Right.
in order to get the job.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you are good at the job. There are plenty of very young people who have next to no orchestra experience that are marvelous audition takers,
Hmm.
but they don't know how to do the job yet.
Yeah. Well, how could they? Yeah.
How could they?
Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Right.
And nobody has come up with a better way, just
And
like
the,
nobody's come up with a better way than standardized tests. But it's important to understand that for ourselves of like, if you are not good at taking auditions, that doesn't mean you're not good at the job. It's basically, they're all basically performing. It's just
yeah.
performing under pressure.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful essay book called The Brass Player's Cookbook.
Yeah.
It's written in very cute format of recipes,
Okay.
but they're essays by some of the best brass players ever.
Yeah.
And there's one in particular from Craig Knox, the tuba player in Pittsburgh. And
Hmm.
he talks about practicing performing and using your recording device as a means of practicing
Yes.
performing. That
Yeah.
you set yourself up like with your intention of what you're going to do
Hmm.
in your performance and then deliver. And you don't record it again. That's it. That's your performance. And you listen back like however many times and take notes and stuff, and then you work on it. But it's like learning how to go.
On demand. Yeah. If you're in musical theater or orchestral player, opera, there really isn't that many opportunities to perform. Like if I'm a folk singer or I play, even if I'm a DJ or something, I can just get a gig or play a party or something. So you might not actually have that much experience performing in front of a crowd. Yeah. And then you got to go in and play solo in front of people.
And it
So
matters more in that
yeah.
moment because now there's all this pressure. You have to simulate it. That's why we do mock auditions.
Wow.
That's what the point of that is, to simulate the nerves. Because if you have people whose opinion you care about, your friends, your colleagues, teachers,
Right.
you become nervous
Yeah.
and you learn how
Yeah.
to handle the nerves. Something that I realized is that I was less
Uh,
nervous when I was recording just audio. I started doing
mhm.
this a couple years ago, that I got in my head, well, if I make a video and it turns out well, then I can
Yeah.
have put it on TikTok and Instagram, then it's content. So now there was a little bit more pressure involved because I
Okay.
wasn't going to do anything with the audio when I was just recording on my phone and voice memos. It was just like, I'm just going to listen back to it.
Oh, so you're
There
saying
was,
preparing your trombone pieces, recording them, and putting them on the internet?
when I was, because this is how I prepare for auditions, is I
Yeah.
record every single thing. But
Yeah.
I do it like, okay, this is my performance of this
Right.
excerpt. And I started a couple years ago only doing it as a video. And I
Mhm.
still don't do it a second take. If it doesn't turn out good, then nothing, like then it doesn't turn out. But there's an extra layer of nerves knowing that, well, if it does turn out, if I get a good take, now I have content that I can use because I'm not going to spend an hour recording the same excerpt. I'm going to do one take. So I
Yeah.
learned that about myself. And
Uh-huh.
it was much more useful, but it also made me better at making videos. So more and more often when I'm doing that, when I'm like in a grind of practicing something and making and recording myself that way,
Right.
I get good stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it on my phone. It's not like the greatest quality or whatever, but that's the wonderful thing about TikTok and Instagram. Is like nobody's really expecting it to be like
No, it
me in the
doesn't.
practice room. I even
Right.
ended up with a hilarious video of my dog
Uh,
singing along to Symphonie Fantastique. I discovered that my puppy,
yeah.
who's now a year old, likes to sing when I play high.
Yeah.
And I like
Yeah.
cracked the last note because I was distracted by her. And I just wrote
Yeah.
like oops across the video. I
Yeah.
was like, whatever. It was
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. I do see a lot of younger people putting videos up of, oh, I'm working on, or I transcribed this in the jazz world, and which is cool. It's cool. I
Yeah.
just wonder what, I mean, the thinking is they just want to share.
There's a much more wholesome, better thing about this is my practice account for
Okay.
young people. And young people do that a lot. It makes me
Yeah.
feel so old saying young people, but
Yeah.
students, let's call it that. Students
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
Professionals have this pressure that we put on ourselves that it has to be perfect. I don't think that's helpful. I think it'd be better if we put stuff out there that this is what I'm practicing and this is what I
Yeah.
want to improve. Like
Right.
instead of letting it only putting what's perfect, what if we put something up with some pimples on it and just point out what they are? Like
Right.
these are the things that are wrong with this that I hear that I'm going to go work on now. That way we're giving humanity to ourselves and normalizing imperfections, which
Right.
is all of us. And we're guiding the listening of the younger person so they can hear
Yeah.
what we needed to work on. And actually, I've done this with my graduate student who just retired. Why did I say retired? Graduate. I did
Yeah.
that with her when I was getting ready for my auditions, that I would send her
Yeah.
my little mock, but I would give her the comments that I gave myself so she could listen for what I heard. It was fixing
Well,
her ears, improving
yeah,
her
and the
ears.
content you're making that goes on the internet, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, is the consumer is other musicians. I mean, you might get other people who listen in, but it's not like everybody who goes to the New York Philharmonics is going to go on to TikTok and try to find, oh, I wonder if that trombone player had a practice video I can listen to. But
It's
we
just trombone
think
players. It's like it's very niche. It's just just trombone players, sometimes
it's
other brass
niche.
players, and
Yeah.
it's fine. Like that's what it's for. You
You're
don't play the trombone expecting to be famous. That's not how that works.
still, we do worry about how we appear to our peers. I mean, because our peers are the ones we interact with. When you were doing these videos or started doing them, did you ever worry that somebody's going to listen in and hear that you're not perfect?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I worked on that self-talk just like I work on my self-talk in the practice room. And I'm much more interested in what it does for me as a player to feel like I'm sharing part of myself with others.
Right.
But then I worry about the people that look for mistakes.
I mean, the trolls are going to always be there.
The trolls are everywhere, and it's kind of hilarious, to be honest.
Yeah.
Sasha Romero, one of the principal trombones of the Metropolitan Opera, hosted this Star Wars challenge. And she didn't invent this, right? I think
Mhm.
Trombone Timo is the one who did it first. It's super
Okay.
duper high.
Yeah.
But Sasha's got a crazy high range, and she's like, I'm going to do this too. And she used, like, put some extra reverb to make it sound more like the original
Right.
theme. And she did it up a major third. And some person who has pictures of himself next to a sousaphone but is not a professional musician is like, this isn't real audio. I heard somebody else do this. She gave him the benefit of the doubt that it came up on his reels and he didn't look at her profile. And she's like, no, this is me. I'm actually this person. He's like,
yeah.
professionals don't have to say that they're professional.
Yeah.
It kept going. And finally,
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that it was still going. So I like never, but I got in there and I was like, Trombone Timo did it first. Yeah. Now Sasha is doing it. The fact that you can't tell that that's two different audios says everything we need to know about you as a musician. And then he said something that was like kind of threatening, and I just let it go. Yeah. Like, you don't want to get into this with me. And I'm just like, you know what I learned down south? Bless your heart.
It's a balance. Like, if you want to be social media, these things are great in some ways, especially it's a promotion tool. I mean, in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
which is good. The balance is, how do you filter out the terrible stuff?
Somebody commented on one of my videos on my YouTube channel. It's a live performance of Morceau Symphonique. It's from a long time ago. It's a live performance at Montclair State University, where at the time I was faculty member, and it was like a faculty recital. Okay. This person who turned out to be a saxophone player was commenting that it was like, good try, but I think you missed too many notes or something. Like, it was just, I looked at who they were. You are a saxophone player. Barely missed anything, first of all. Second, it's a live performance. Nobody's perfect. And I thought about it, and I was like, I just deleted the comment. So I was like, Ed, you do not deserve a response.
Yeah,
you don't deserve a response. I don't really care what you think, and most other people don't either. But there was somebody who commented on the video about my audition, and they said that I gave up my career aspirations for a man, and that deserved a response.
Your recent video where you're talking about your recent audition, when you left Colorado and get
that deserved a response for everybody else who was going to read it. And I said, I deferred one dream to have a family. I deferred it. Yeah. I gave up nothing. I obviously just took an audition and was successful. I haven't stopped taking auditions. I haven't stopped.
Yeah.
And that's my prerogative. Like you said, I decided to have a family when I wanted to have a family and not wait for my career to be what I wanted it to be. Because that goal line can go on forever, right? Like your career aspirations. And I realized it was not helping me be successful in auditions by making that a requirement in order to start a family. That was not helpful. That was not emotionally helpful. It was not helpful for my playing. It was detrimental to everything. I was better off living my life.
I mean, it's something I personally struggled with when I got out of music. Was I realized, playing music and being successful in that space is not the only thing in life. There's other things that are actually more important. Maybe this is important, but these are more, at times they're more important. People like athletes or musicians, they try so hard to achieve something, and then it becomes all consuming. If you could tell yourself something like the girl that was at Interlochen looking at the future of the dreams, what would you tell that girl?
Just do the work and be in the moment and stop worrying about the outcomes.
So what does that look like if you're a high school senior and you're trying to go on to the next level of music, whatever that means? How do you live in the moment of?
If you're a high school senior right now and it's almost June, the work is done. The auditions have happened. It's over, that part of it. So you cannot obsess about the letters coming. Put the work in, enjoy the moment, be in the moment while you are practicing. Be mindful, focus on your craft. Worst case scenario, you don't get into school anywhere.
Right.
Let's say that's the catastrophizing.
Or you can't afford to go to the ones you get into or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's something to do in that case. If you don't get enough money to go to any of the schools that you want to go to, you can still stay home and practice. Get together with local people who are good, who will help you because you have to keep playing with other people. You can have Zoom lessons. You can, we make it out like there's a timeline. And if you don't do something by X moment that you failed, and that's not true. The only way to fail is to stop, is to give up entirely. Your journey is not anybody else's, and you do not need to do anything on somebody else's timeline.
They're so artificial. These 18 years old, you must do this, this, and this, and you must, you only have so many years on this earth. So time does matter, but not in the way we probably think of it. Because I remember a friend of mine lives in the city, and he said that at Columbia and NYU, the schools that are high academics, hard to get into, it's a lot easier to transfer there because a lot of the first year students don't make it. And then they just burn out, they move back home, whatever. And he said, you could just slide in there on the second year and you're fine. Nobody's going to know that you transferred there if you don't tell them.
Well, and speaking of that, of transferring, Colin and I had two different students at Montclair who fell through the cracks for whatever reason and didn't get in anywhere else. Yeah. They probably should have. Maybe if they'd had a better teacher in the right moment, whatever. One of them went to MSM, Manhattan School of Music. The other one had Julliard and Curtis fighting over them for their junior year of college. You know, these were two people that, if circumstances had been a little different, they probably would have gotten into a better school sooner. But as it
Right.
was, they went to a cheap school for 2 years
Yeah.
with good teachers who focused on them and knew from the beginning you deserve to go to a better school, to graduate from a better school with better colleagues.
Credential. Right.
Not the credentials, but the studio, the
Yeah.
people that you learn
Yeah.
the most from the people around you. Colin started out at MSM and then he transferred to
Oh, really?
Juilliard.
Am I right that you can't get an audition without a degree of some type?
Oh, do you mean for an orchestra?
Yeah, orchestra auditions.
No, it does not matter if you have a degree or not.
Okay. It's just
Colin
your
never
overall
finished.
resume.
Yeah, my
Right.
husband is in the New York Philharmonic. He never finished his undergrad.
Okay. So it's, but you need to have a resume or CV, whatever you call it,
Yeah,
explaining what you can do.
Yeah, so your
Yeah.
resume for an orchestra is 1 page, and it shows your experience.
Yeah.
When you're
Okay.
in school, there's pretty much nothing on it. It's very difficult. So going to a better school shows that you're a better player, in that, like, for lack of
Theoretically.
other information, that's the information they have.
Okay.
But if you have a teacher who's willing to vouch
Mm.
for you, they can write a letter of recommendation and get you into an audition that you were rejected from. Also, an option very often is they ask for a tape. They're like, well, we don't really see anything on your resume to show us that you know what you're doing, but why don't you record these excerpts by this date and show us that you are on a level that you're worth
Okay.
listening to.
Really? Okay. But if you're, I mean, obviously you're not going to be able to have a blank resume applying for the top orchestras, right? You're going to have to work your way up. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. Some of the biggest
Really? Okay.
orchestras they have more money, so
Okay.
they can listen to more people.
Oh,
They
have
also
a
do
bigger
things.
team of people to handle all that. Yeah.
No, they can afford to rent out the space to
Okay.
present the audition for longer. It's
Okay.
expensive to put on an audition. You have to rent the space that you're using and
Yes.
pay the committee to preside over it.
Right.
So the biggest orchestras will do things like in the New York Philharmonic, the first round, anybody who wants to can audition. And they treat the taped first round exactly like the live. So you can send a recorded round and they judge them exactly the same way as the live ones. And they listen to like 160 people.
Yeah. That's good. They should use my software to do that.
It's really the smallest orchestras that have the most limited timeline that are the strictest about who can come.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense
Because
now.
they just don't have enough time to listen to everybody. And so it can be very frustrating because this regional orchestra that you think is a good starter job for you as a student
Yeah.
is rejecting you. And you have to complain. And sometimes they'll make it work. Sometimes you can get your teachers to write a letter of recommendation and they'll listen. Sometimes they won't. But what every student should remember is that it's not just this other students who are trying to audition for those. It's also the top freelancers who are trying to piece together several of these regional orchestras. Like, that's what I'm doing, right? I'm in the American Symphony. Now I'm trying to play in Princeton Symphony, get a contract there.
Yeah.
Neither of those are full-time jobs. But, if I piece together enough of these regional jobs, then I have a 40-week season.
I remember on some of your social media videos you're talking about being a freelancer now. What is it like living or doing these gigs, where there's no audition and stuff versus this highly structured audition world? And how would you have prepared yourself like years ago for that, if that's what you wanted to do?
I would have focused way more on sight reading because mostly what I do now, not mostly, but a lot of what I do now, there's no rehearsals.
Right.
Like I go and play with the New York City Ballet and I just play a performance.
Do you get, the set list, did they call it a set list? Before
the music, I get the music beforehand.
You get the actual sheet music. Okay, yeah.
So I get the sheet. There's a few things that they do to make it easier. Number one, yes, I have the music.
Okay.
I also have access to archived recordings of the performances. But if it's a new ballet, there is no archived recording.
Do they send you like a MIDI anything or?
No, I'll get to that in a second. But it's also a performance of the dancer dancers. I can't see the
Oh,
conductor.
really?
In Broadway, you get a conductor cam, which is very helpful. So you see what the conductor's
Yeah,
doing.
because sometimes don't they have peep musicians or singers like in another part of the building with the and then because they don't have enough room in the pit. So you
Right.
would do more sight reading, which is cool. We're at SAP Audition. We just signed a deal with Sight Reading Factory, the app, where it generates music for you to build it right into our audition system. So you can offer that like right in, and it will generate new music every single time.
So you can't be futzing with the notes. I play so many books every week that I can't practice every single note. I have to get the gestalt and like look over it and like what actually requires practicing. Now I don't have to practice everything. I kind of get the hang of it and I know what I have to do. If I were going to prepare young people for a real career in music, like you should practice sight reading every day. You should just turn a metronome on and go to the back of some etude book and don't stop. Or play duets with another person and same thing. Like you can't stop. The metronome goes on and you both play until you don't have any music left and hope you stayed together.
Right. Are there any freelance gigs that you've done that you wouldn't take?
I think where I'm really getting to now is I have to be careful about how far away, like how much time does something actually take? Like I just did something that it was really like, and this was not about the people. It was brass quintet, delightful, like people I love hanging out with, great musicians, which is why I said yes. And it was an hour and a half each way. So it's 3 hours plus the time I was up there. And I did the math and I was like, that's not worth it to me anymore. And
No, it
that's
can't
coming
be.
from a
Yeah.
place of privilege that I am working enough. My time is worth more now because I have less of it.
Well, even if it's not privilege, it still should be considered because, well, it's gas money and that mileage is expensive.
I don't even think about that, but that's there too. But also I have little kids and it was a
Yes,
Saturday
exactly. Yeah.
and I could have been home with my family. And
So you've set up these boundaries. Of course, when you just start out, you can't do that. Right?
there's nothing that I've done that I regret doing that one time. I did a Persian pop star gig. This was artistically in the toilet. The dress code was sexy black fishnets and courage. I played more tambourine than trombone. I had like all these wax earplugs in my ears and I just played into the microphone. But I left there with like $800 and the two people that I met are amazing. The saxophone and trumpet player, I'm like still friends with them. Don't regret it for a second. Would I be like dying to do that every weekend? No. Would I do it again? Yes.
For the
I would do it
$800.
every so often, even for a little less. Like I would love, like I love the variety, and I'm down. Like I subbed in my friend's wedding band, and I was really nervous because I had no music beforehand. I didn't know what was going to happen. They would
The top 40 thing. Yeah.
they would change songs in the middle of a tune. There was like they had the horn stuff memorized to go out and dance. I was like, I'm sight reading. I can't do that. I had to drink like a Monster Energy drink to stay up and like, enough to be like, I didn't get home until 2 and then I was toast the next day. Would I do that like even once a month? No. Would I do it again? Yes. It was very fun. I would do it like sporadically, super fun. The hang was great. I was dancing and had a good time and playing good music. It's like the regularity of it would determine how often I would do it. But you're right, when you're starting out, as long as it's not really undercutting the union in some way, kind of do everything. I also recommend everybody remember that not everybody can do every gig. FOMO and jealousy that comes out when you see somebody doing a gig that you wish you were doing. It's like, what? There is room for everyone and you can't do everything. Let them do it. Let them have a great time. There's no shortage of fabulous players who are nice people who deserve to work and they deserve good work.
And recommend them too. Because they'll recommend you. So how can people follow you, keep up with what's happening if they want a trombone lesson? Or just advice on how to be an amazing trombone player? Like how do they get in touch with you and all those things?
On Instagram, it's at Nikki TRB. I have a link tree with all my other stuff there.
Thanks. Thank you so much for your time.